Right, already? Good. Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor John Ward, leader of Babergh District Council, and I will be chairing this meeting. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. And please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of this meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. Item 1, apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Any to declare anyone? No. Item 3, paper BCA 2526, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2025. So if we just go to those meeting minutes, you'll find them starting on page 5 of your agenda pack. Going through from page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and page 14. Any questions or comments, members? Thank you. Right then, may I have a proposer, please? Councillor Saw, and a seconder, Councillor Helen Davis.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Councillor Sally Davis, do you want me to take your vote verbally? Okay. Councillor Derek Davis and Councillor Hendry, do you want me to take your votes verbally? Or... Yeah, it's come through now. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Thank you. Item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Members of the Cabinet, are there any comments on that? Nope. Right. Moving on then to the first main item, the big one. Item 8, which is paper, just lost that. Paper BCA 2527, the 2026-27 Draft General Fund Budget and Medium-Term Financial Position. I'll now introduce the report as the Cabinet Member for Finance. This is our first formal look at the General Fund Budget, and it is still a draft paper, with the final report coming to Cabinet and then Council as usual next year. The numbers presented today will change as forecasts are refined and, of course, once we know the provisional local government finance settlement this month. Although the quarterly positions for the current year have improved since we set the budget, and we will look at the current position later on in this meeting, yet again budget setting is proving to be a challenge. This year is probably the most difficult we have faced, as you all know from the briefings and the budget workshops on the options available to us. The government conducted the Fair Funding 2.0 consultation in the summer and published the consultation response and the local government finance policy statement last month. Details of these are provided in paragraphs 7.8 to 7.27. We will get the first 3-year settlement in many years, which is good, as is the move to simplifying the funding streams by merging many of the newer grants into the revenue support grant. However, the intention to allocate funding based on a revised and extended needs-based allocation is expected to penalise rural areas. We are all aware of the work that has been done and the difficult decisions we have had to make, resulting in an impressive £2.5 million reduction in the net cost of service. But this paper shows that there is still a budget gap of £906,000. We cannot finance this entirely from the Financial Resilience Reserve, as it would become too depleted too soon. And so, even if government funding is better than expected, we must make further savings and increase income. The budget summary is provided in Table 1 on page 18. Appendix A and the charts in paragraph 6.10 show the gross expenditure and gross income from all sources. Gross expenditure is £29.4 million, an increase of 2.6% on last year, on the current year. Funding is £28.5 million, again an increase of 1.7% on 2025 to 26. Section 6 of the report details the assumptions we have made around the expenditure budget items. The largest of these is, of course, our staff budget, and even with the pay award and incremental salary increases, we still have a small reduction in the salaries budget, and most other employee cost items have remained nearly as before. But there is a reduction of more than £1 million in the total employee cost budget, almost entirely due to the 3-yearly revaluation of the pension fund that has enabled us to reduce the contribution rate from 26 to 16.4%, saving £896,000. The sharing of staff costs in the Memorandum of Understanding with Mid-Suffolk has been revised to reflect the time staff will be devoting to each council, and this will give us a saving of £249,000. Other expenditure items include a decreased premises, supplies and services, a large increase in major contracts due to the new food waste contract, and a small increase in capital financing charges. There is an increase of just over £2 million in grants and contributions, almost entirely due to the extended producer responsibility grant and the new burdens funding for food waste collections. These will be needed to cover the increased revenue costs of implementing better recycling. Section 7 of the report details the assumptions we have made around the income budget items. New fees and charges were approved by Cabinet last month, and the forecast is slightly down at £5.229 million on the current year due to an expected 2.2% volume decrease. The forecast total for all fees, charges and rental income is also down at £7.7 million. However, at 27% of gross funding and income, this is a significant part of our budget. At the moment, we haven't included any increase in parking charges or fixed penalty notices, which are still to be agreed. As a result of the uncertainty over the finance settlement, we haven't yet included any amount for the government grant funding, which has currently put a pressure of £1.3 million on the budget. Details of the new council tax rates are given in paragraphs 8.39 to 8.43, and we are, as usual, proposing a 2.99% increase in council tax, the maximum permitted without holding a referendum. This is necessary and expected by the government. The Revenue Support Grant resource adjustment assumes this. It will mean a rise of £5.79 to £199.52 per annum for a Band D property, generating an additional £214,000. A further £134,000 will be generated by an expected 0.86% increase in the tax base. We will also have to collect the new high-value council tax surcharge for government. The recently announced business rates changes are listed in paragraph 7.34. There will be a business rates reset, changes to the multipliers and levy rates, and higher tariffs. There will also be changes to the Section 31 grants and new retail, hospitality and leisure multipliers, replacing the current relief, and other changes are listed in the report. Due to the extent of the changes and the unavailability of funding details, we haven't been able to draft a budget at the moment, but the forecast for 26 to 27 prepared when setting this year's budget has been included. We can expect significant changes from this when the provisional settlement is published. Section 8 of the report lists the pressures on the budget, the changes from this year, and the savings that have been found. A sterling effort by the senior leadership team and service heads has resulted in identified savings and increased income totaling £6.7 million, offset by pressures of £4.4 million. The result is a reduction of the net cost of service compared with the current year of £2.3 million, which rises to the £2.5 million seen in Table 1 when the waste charges changes are taken into account. And this is a 17% increase. The forecast position for the earmarked reserves is shown in Appendix C. The reserve movements include £333,000 to fund the forecast as at quarter two, the forecast deficit as at quarter two for the current year, and the forecast £906,000 deficit for 26-27. The position over the next few years shows our reserves depleting to the point of being negative at the end of 2029 to 30. This is not something that can occur in reality, but indicates that we will not have sufficient reserves to fund future budget gaps. Section 10 shows the forecasts for the medium-term financial plan period up to 2030 to 31. Although the current local government reorganisation timetable has the establishment of new Suffolk Unitary Council or councils, hopefully the latter, in 2028, the process is still in its early stages and we will continue to plan over a 5-year horizon. Table 14 shows the costs and demands for the council services continuing to outstrip the resources available to fund them, with increasing forecast deficits each year, amounting to a cumulative shortfall of £11.9 million over 5 years. The Financial Resilience Reserve will not have enough funds, as I've said, to finance the gap in 29 to 30, and this is an unsustainable situation, and significant savings and or increases in income will need to be identified in the years to come. The other uncertainty facing us is that the implementation of local government reorganisation has costs, currently unknown, that we will have to bear. A summary of the capital programme is shown in Section 11, with a detail in Appendix D. We have a much reduced budget of £3.8 billion, which will give us savings in both interest and MRP charges. In summary, further work will be done in the next few weeks to close the remaining budget gap, and we will soon know the extent of that task when we receive the provisional finance settlement. And finally, I'd like to thank Melissa, David and the finance team for all the work they've put in to prepare this budget. I'd like now to propose the recommendation in paragraph 3.1 of the report that the draft general fund budget proposals for 2026 to 27 and the draft MTFP set out in the report be noted. And may I have a seconder, please? Councillor Saul, thank you. Any questions from Cabinet members? Councillor Sally Davis.
Just looking at 7.2 in the report, it states that fees and charges will be increased, but revenue will be down by the volume of services will be reduced. Is that because we expect a drop-off in take-up of some of the services? And why are we bothering to do it if it's going to lead to a reduction in income?
I think I will ask if one of the officers can respond, but I think generally we have to forecast based on current trends we see in service income, and we've noted that there is going to be a slight shortfall in terms of volume of some of those items, and notwithstanding the increases we've put in various services, we still will be seeing that shortfall in income. Can anyone else provide any further background, Melissa?
Yeah, it's probably easier to see on table 9A. The table there shows kind of the change
The
between
breakdown,
volume
yeah.
increase and the fee changes, if you like. So you can see the bigger items there: strategic planning, car parking, and that's comparing the 25-26 to the 26-27 volume changes. So it's probably worth looking at that table and seeing. You can see both, like I say, fee increases and the changes in volume, whether that's up or down.
Can I just ask another question as well?
Yep.
At 7.19, so the local government finance statement, can we be optimistic in any sense at all about future government funding? If the funds are going to be distributed according to levels of deprivation, and we know that deprivation in rural areas seems to be underestimated or disregarded, do we know there are going to be new formulas? Do we know whether they are going to take into account rural deprivation, or have we got any grounds on which to be optimistic?
You want to, Melissa, yeah.
So they have released the proportions that are going to be allocated to deprivation. What we don't know is the size of the pot that's necessarily going to be applied to, because they're still tweaking around with some of the pots. So it's not easy to say how much that's going to be applicable, because they are rolling in so many other core grants into the revenue support grant. So it's going to be a little bit of smoke and mirrors. They also said that the food waste new burdens would be rolled into the revenue support grant as well. So when we get the announcement next week, I think it's going to be a bit of a try and unpick what's been rolled in and where we end up. But I'm ever optimistic.
And I think I'm right in saying, Melissa, that they're taking out of consideration the delivery of services in a sparsely populated area, but all but adult and social services. So that will have an impact on us as well. Any other questions? Councillor Saw.
Given that this is the 15th year that we have had reductions in government support, I think it would be interesting to know how much money we have lost over the last 15 years, and what huge efforts the council has made to bridge the gap. And as Councillor Ward said, it is getting harder and harder, and in the remaining years of the council's existence, harder still. So would you be able to give us that figure now or at a later date?
I can certainly provide that at a later date. I know in previous years' budget reports we've talked about how the revenue support grant in particular was the biggest one. When I first joined 10 years ago, it was quite a significant amount of money. The council were receiving it, and year on year that's decreased. We then had new homes bonus coming in, and that kind of grew and grew, and then that started to tail off as well. We lost the rural service delivery grant in this financial year as well. So I certainly could track back and see how much we've lost. And since I've been here in the last 10 years, we've certainly saved and generated additional income of about £2 million every year. So it has been a challenge, but we've stepped up to that challenge.
And I think one of the good things being in Suffolk is that we have this history of doing things together across the county, sharing services and taking imaginative approaches to saving money. Clearly our partnership with Mid-Suffolk has been invaluable. Indeed, we couldn't have survived without it. Colleagues in the west of the county have come together and formed a single council, similarly in the east of the county. So that all of those things are the Suffolk response to what is a big challenge for all of us. Any other questions? Councillor Saw.
Sorry, thought
That's
of something
okay.
else. In the paper, there is an element which talks about, when we talk about the changes to government support, which talks about an area cost adjustment for remote areas. Now, obviously, we have remote areas, and it costs us more money to deliver our services, which was why it was such a blow to lose the revenue delivery grant with no notice. But have we any idea whether that will benefit us at all?
Yeah, it's very similar to the deprivation answer as well. So I do know the percentage, I just don't know the quantum of what they're going to apply that to. So yeah, it will all be clear next week, hopefully.
Any other questions? Councillor Helen Davis.
I'd like to expand on Councillor Saw's request regarding the amount of money we've lost from the government. I'd like to see by year what we received, and then I'd like to see what our income was, and I'd like to see what our expenditure was year by year, because I do think if we publish that, our residents will be able to clearly see, you know, the good job we've been doing with the increasingly minimised resources that we have. Because this is a tough budget and it's not going to be well received by people, I suspect. So we need to be clear for the underlying reasons why and be able to demonstrate that.
If there are no other questions from the Cabinet, Councillor Wyman, any questions? Right, I'll open it up for debate then. Does anyone from the Cabinet wish to start the debate? No? Nobody wants to say anything? Oh, go on. Councillor McCraw, surely.
I'm afraid, Chair, there's not much can be said. We've worked on this for so many months.
Yeah.
We are getting closer to where we want to be. We still have some way to go, and it was ever thus. I think the figures from the last 10 years will be quite significant. I've been quoting for years a loss of income since 2010, 2011 of approximately 40%, maybe 50% depending on how you do the calculation. That's a very rough estimate, but I can see Melissa nodding, so I think I'm in that general area. That's a phenomenal amount given the services that we provide that people use every day.
Yep.
As opposed to those services that they use once in a blue moon or don't even affect them at all. All we can do is our best, and we've done so.
Thank you. Right, well, if there are no further comments, and I can understand that the report is comprehensive, the explanations are very clear, behind the decisions are very clear and easy to understand. So I think it's, notwithstanding my comment earlier about further work that needs to be done once we know the provisional settlement, I think it's in a good state to go forward through that process, and we will revisit this again next month when we will approve in Cabinet before it goes on to Council in February. So I'd like now to open the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right, okay, the next item is item 9, paper BCA 2528, the Housing Revenue Account 2026 to 27 draft budget and the 30-year business plan. And again, I'll introduce the report as a Cabinet member for Finance. As with the General Fund, this is our first formal look at the HRA budget, and it is still a draft paper with the final report coming to Cabinet and then Council next year. Looking at the business plan, the 30-year HRA business plan sets out the Council's long-term investment strategy to maintain the quality of its housing stock and increase the size of its stock. The Council has a legal duty to ensure the HRA remains solvent, and the business plan must show that our revenue and investment plans are sustainable and appropriate. It is updated annually, and the latest plan can be found in Appendix A. Paragraphs 4.1 to 4.11 explain the context and challenges facing our HRA, which the business plan has had to consider. There will be additional borrowing to maintain the works programme, but the summary table in the business plan is showing a much improved position with a surplus, that is the reserves balance, at year 30 of just under £55 million. The draft budget shows a deficit of £8.692 million compared with the current year's budget deficit of £8.353 million. The pressures and savings contributing to this are shown in Table 1 in paragraph 4.16 and Table 2A in paragraph 4.17 shows the budget summary comparing 2026-27 with the 2025-26 budget. Income has increased by £1.3 million and the expenditure has decreased by £840,000. A revised comparison with the latest Q2 forecast of 2025-26 is provided in Table 2B, and the primary reasons for the forecast deficit can be seen in the financing section. There is an increase in interest payments, but the big number is a revenue contribution to capital to finance our capital programme. Most of what was in the budget for the current year will now be carried forward due to a reduction in this year's capital programme. Please note that the agenda supplement contains a corrected Table 2A, and the supplement also contains an additional Table 2C showing more detail of the 2026-27 budget forecast against the current year's budget and the Q2 position. Table 5 in paragraph 4.20 lists the assumptions that have gone into the preparation of the budget. These include proposed rent, service charge and utility charge increases. And Table 6 in paragraph 4.25 provides a breakdown of the staffing costs showing the totals, savings and pressures for each service area. The reserves are shown in Table 7 in paragraph 4.29, and after deducting the forecast budget deficit, there will be just under £4.4 million in the reserves. But this does depend on the capital programme being delivered on time and the need for the revenue contribution to capital. The proposed capital programme for 26 to 27 and the next 2 years after that is shown in Table 8 in paragraph 4.31. It shows a reduction over the 3 years mainly due to the completion of the decarbonisation work and the upland site development. As a result of the government's reduction in the discount, we are expecting a decrease in the number of right-to-buy sales. The government has also increased the flexibility of how we can use right-to-buy receipts, which is very welcome. A summary of rent setting history is provided in Section 5, and the business plan assumptions, including the government's expected decision on rent convergence, are provided in Section 6. So in summary, as you've seen, there has been a marked improvement in the HRA. The business plan is showing a much better forecast for the 30 years, and it has a robust strategy to finance the work needed to improve and maintain stock quality so that revenue spend on repairs and reactive maintenance can be reduced. I want to take this opportunity to thank Deborah Fenton for everything she has done for us, and her legacy is a healthy HRA, along with a robust programme of stock improvement to meet the needs of new legislation and regulatory compliance. There's still much to be done to address the backlog of works, but we're now in a much better place to get this done. And finally, I'd like to thank Deborah and her team, and also Finance Business Partner Jenny Smithies for preparing this budget and also the updated HRA business plan. I'd like now to propose the recommendation in paragraph 3.1 that the draft HRA account budget proposals for 26 to 27 and the draft 30-year business plan set out in the report be noted. And may I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ruth Hendry. Right. Okay, any questions, Cabinet members? No? No questions? Councillor Wyman, do you have any questions?
No, Chair.
Right, we'll go into debate then. Does anyone want to contribute, say anything? Councillor Saul.
You can always rely on me. Recognising the strictures that the government is working under currently, what do we think the likelihood of us getting any further government funding to upgrade under the decarbonisation funds? Because we still have a large number of council houses, well, a significant number of council houses that have oil-fired central heating. So I'd like to know, A, do we think there is a possibility of any more government funding? If not, is there anything we can do to help our tenants have more cost-effective heating?
Would anyone like to?
Anyone fancy answering?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, sorry. Do you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. She asked a question.
Okay. The question was, we have been fortunate in getting government funding for decarbonising and upgrading the heating of some of our council properties. We still have some properties that have oil heating. Do we think there's any likelihood of getting any more money from the government? If not, can we find some way of helping these tenants?
So we have been awarded more funds from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Funds, which is Wave 3. That work will be starting early in the new year, actually working on those properties. There's about 150, 160 properties on the scheme, so 80 in each district. In terms of going forward, coming off of moving away from oil boilers, that is something that's on our agenda. We just need to be careful that any works we do outside of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund make sure that we absolutely insulate the properties correctly, because as we've seen from previous moves to air source heating away from it can be a costly install if it's not done properly.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking, though, that the government has reduced funding for insulation?
So in terms of insulation work, we have a funding pot in our capital budget for that anyway. So once we finish our SHD, Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund works, we are being more sort of intelligent with how we use that capital funding to make sure we can deliver whole house retrofit moving forward as well. So it is on our radar to make sure we're planned for that.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else? Councillor Helen Davis.
Thank you. It's a question for officers over here. Once you've used up the budget to do as much retrofitting as you can, how many homes will be left with an EPC of below C?
I'll need to come back to you with an exact figure, but our EPC position in terms of the number of properties that will be below a C we're actually quite a healthy position. I'm more than confident that we will see the government's requirement is EPCC by 2030, but I'm more than confident. Our target is 2028 that will be EPCC by, but I can come back to you with the exact numbers.
Okay, that's we had moving questions into debate, but I don't mind if there are further questions. But does anyone want to move into debate, or should we just go to the vote? Go to the vote? We'll go to the vote. Would you conduct the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 10. We're now starting to look at the quarter 2 position for the current financial year. So this is paper BCA 2529, the General Fund Financial Monitoring for 2025 to 26, quarter 2. And again, I'll introduce the report. I won't be spending too much time on this today, as the focus today is very much on next year's budget, and this is just an update on where we were halfway through the current year at the end of September. The detailed Q2 report is attached to Appendix A. A summary of the Q2 position is shown on page 95, and the key message is that there is a further improvement since Q1, with the forecast deficit reducing again to just £333,000. In summary, the main reasons for the improvement are a much better net cost of services. And this is due to one or two things. There's a positive variance against budget for the net expenditure, there's an increase in recharges, and there's a much greater item 8 debit recharge to the HRA due to the interest on greater internal borrowing by the HRA to finance the PWLB loan repayment. But this is, however, offset by a greater item 8 credit recharge from the HRA, and also it's further offset by movements in the business rates items, particularly the prior year's surplus not being realised and now showing as a deficit. The earmarked reserves are shown on page 99, and the reserves end of year forecast is slightly higher than budget at £10.7 million based on the current audited financial statements for 2024 to 25 and the forecast movements for 2025 to 26. The capital programme is shown on pages 100 to 103, and we're forecasting an end of year underspend of just over £1.1 million, and the funding for the capital programme is shown on page 103. The prudential indicators at the end of Q2 are in Appendix B, and so therefore I'd like to propose the recommendations in section 3 of the main report to note the General Fund 2025 to 26 Q2 revenue actuals of £2.6 million, to note the General Fund 2025 to 26 forecast deficit of £333,000 against a budget deficit of £633,000, and finally to note the capital programme and capital financing spent to date, £3.8 million, and forecast of £11.9 million for the financial year. And may I have a seconder, please? Councillor Helen Davis. Any questions? All fairly simple and straightforward. Does anyone want to say anything in the debate? Right. Happy to move to the vote. Okay, we'll move to the vote then.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. There's 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right, this is the last one from me, thankfully. Item 11, paper BCA 2530, the Housing Revenue Account Q2 financial outturn for 2025 to 26. Again, I won't be spending too much time introducing this. The detailed Q2 report is attached to Appendix A. A summary of the Q2 position is shown on page 113, and the details provided on the following 2 pages. The key message is that there is a much improved forecast deficit of £2.7 million. In summary, the main reasons for the improvement are that there is a further reduction in expenditure from the Q1 figure, with this now being an underspend of £690,000 against budget. There are employee cost underspends, a reduction in contracted services due to voids, delays, and savings in the predicted repair spend. However, there have been an increase in legal expenses, asbestos surveys and removal, and consultancy services. The biggest contribution, of course, to the changed position is that we will not now be needing the large revenue contribution to capital that we agreed in the budget due to a reduction in the capital spend. And so the forecast for this has been reduced by almost £5 million. The capital programme spend is shown on page 116 and financing on page 117. The forecast spend of £12.3 million is a £15.2 million underspend against budget. And the key contributions to this are provided in the commentary column. The reserves position is shown on page 118, and because there is a much smaller deficit, the reserves forecast balance is now £13.1 million. So again, I'd like to propose the recommendations in section 3 of the report to note the HRA Q2 actuals of £1.3 million, to note the 2025 to 26 forecast position of £2.7 million against a budget of £8.3 million, and to note the capital programme and capital financing spent to date, which is £4.8 million, and forecast, which is £12.3 million. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ruth Hendry. I'll now open it up for questions. Any questions, members of the Cabinet? Nope. Okay. I'll open up the item for debate. Does anyone want to say anything? Councillor Saul.
Looking at, do we feel that, I mean, we've made great strides in improving our housing stock, doing the stock survey, and the indicators are all very encouraging, but there's increased regulation. We want to ensure that all our houses meet the decent homes standard, and obviously there is now the increased regulation as regards damp and mould. Do we believe that we have sufficient resources, both physical and financial, to cope with this level of increased regulation?
So financially, yes, we do. Physically, at the moment, no. So I'm currently working on procuring several new contracts. One of the issues with the underspend or the lack of work that we've done on the planned programme to improve our housing stock is really down to the quality of the contracts that we've had and the ability of the contractors to deliver on the volume of work. So similar to what when I renewed contracts on the compliance side of things, we're now looking at these contracts, and we're hoping by the start of the next financial year we would have procured 4 new contracts to work on the key component elements of decent homes to bring us up to standard. I mean, yes, the increased staff resources, yeah, that's
Yeah.
In the past, we have had issues with contractors not meeting the SLAs that we've set for them. So what would be, in these new contracts that you're going to let, what would be the protection for us if they do not meet the standards that we've set?
So we've been very swift to remove contractors from working on any of our properties if they're not performing. Our contracts now have a clear suite of KPIs on what our expectations are on their performance, and we're not keeping anyone on board that isn't delivering, basically. So.
Does anyone want to say anything else? Then I think we'll move to the vote. Can we have the vote, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right. Moving on then, item 12, paper BCA 2531, the Q2 of 2025 to 26, a performance report. And I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resilience to introduce the report. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to introduce report BCA 2531, the Q2 25-26 Babergh performance report. This covers the period from July, August, September 2025. By now we should be used to the format, and I think it's established itself as quite helpful. Almost a single glance look at each sector with the colour-coded red, orange, well, yellow and green. A tick is good, red is an issue, and yellow is in progress. Some highlights. We've awarded 500k, £500,000 of community infrastructure levy monies, 24,000 of Section 106 monies. The Economic Strategy Action Plan has been endorsed by Cabinet during this quarter, that quarter, demonstrating delivery against our plan for Babergh. And delivery against our plans as performance measures is the very purpose of these quarterly performance reports. 8 organisations have now been supported through the Rural England Prosperity Fund, and the number of made neighbourhood plans now stands at 25, with the Cockdock and Washbrook plan being adopted in August, and there are 40 plans in progress in total. Issues to be aware of: well, we have longer waiting times for calls to be answered, and we have recently anyway, and the call abandon rates from the Q1 report have continued into Q2. So we're not meeting targets here, but the October figures are much improved. These figures relate to new staff, staff training, and a certain amount of time lag in performance. I would add, however, that we've achieved targets in the course of the last year. We had a whole year where we were under target, and that's something I've never seen in my time on this council, and we know we can do it. We've achieved it in the past, and we can achieve it again. Tenant satisfaction measures were slightly down this quarter, and the housing team continue to work through their improvement plan. It should be noticed that the results for each quarter are based on just 150 surveys. There's quite a lot of variables in there. So one of the reasons that you need a look at the longer trends over the year to get a bit better indication, and I think the Council Housing Assurance Report attached as an appendix helps give a greater clarity to the progress that's been made in housing, and in fact has already been alluded to during this meeting. Our performance management framework pulls together in one place the approach we take to this overall matter of performance management. Framework shows what we do. It outlines what we do. It continues the next steps to embed all these principles into the organisation. Now, that's an internal working document. It goes on, as it were, behind the scenes. So really, I'm just letting you know it's there. The general principle that we take from this report is that this plan, we can demonstrate that we are meeting our strategic plans, that this is in accord. We don't need to necessarily change any of our strategies, priorities, that we believe we're in the right place and we can continue to provide a service. Now, it may be that other Cabinet members would want to comment on individual sections of the performance management report, but I think overall the document speaks for itself.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone wish to add anything on their particular area? Councillor Hendry.
Thank you. I think Alistair's actually covered quite a lot of what I wanted to say. That's all right, that's fine. I think, in general, I'm really happy with these figures. I think the team are really happy with these figures. It's showing upward trajectories in all our departments, especially in repairs. We've hit 100% of repairs emergency repairs within timeline, which is amazing. And as you say, the tenant satisfaction is based on a small figure, and it also asks people who've had repairs in the last year. So we're really confident that our new job management system is doing the job it's supposed to, and the feedback we're getting from that service is really positive. So again, hopefully everything's in the right direction, and the next few reports should show that. So thank you, Alistair. Councillor McCraw, sorry.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the report? Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, in the attached document about the housing, I was alarmed when I found out that we did have a number of homes that don't reach the decent home standard, and it says that we've got data from a stock condition survey completed on 80% of our homes. The target is 100% of our homes, is it? And secondly, what are the actual numbers of homes that are not up to the decent standard yet in Babergh? Do you know?
I think it's good that we've finally got that figure. We haven't had this data before, and although it's quite shocking how many decent homes we've got that aren't decent home standard, that's been a really good base point for us to work on, that we know what we need to do. I think the team are quite confident in Babergh we're going to get that down to 4% in the next 12 months. Yeah, and that percentage, the 20% that you're talking about, I know we're having issues with access, and we're determined to get into those houses, because to me they could be the ones that need the most work, but I'm not sure how much that comes down to in numbers, that 20%.
I can confirm a breakdown in writing to you for sharing for the exact breakdown of what that 20% is.
And we're confident that we're doing it as fast as we can, if they're non-decent homes.
So we will be. That when I was speaking earlier about the new contracts we're procuring at the minute, if once they are in place, the way the contracts are currently set up is we have one contractor working on both districts. The new contracts will be allotted, so you will have separate contractors for each district, but with the ability for them to cross over and support. And that's why we're confident we can expedite our progress. So the figure I've given there of 3.6% by the end of the 26-27 financial year is quite a conservative figure. We are hoping to exceed that and better that.
Any other questions?
Not so much a question, just a quick calculation. 3,501 houses in the stock cells. So 3.6% would be approximately 126 homes, which, when you consider the area we're covering, is rather less than one might have thought.
Okay. Councillor Helen Davis.
Thank you. Just with regard to the number of stage 1 complaints we've received, we're down year on year, which is great, but which area is receiving most of the complaints, and what are we doing about them?
Stage 1 complaints are what comes in. A lot of stuff are queries. We get queries, and some things are complaints, and some things are not complaints. I think we worry more when they become stage 2 complaints. I don't know if Joe Hobbs, as the head of strategic policy, or Claire Reid possibly would have a better idea of how this stands at the moment.
Thank you. So I think if you ask which service area has the most complaints, at the moment that is housing. But I think it's probably unfair to look at it by quantity of complaints, because not all service areas have the same opportunity for failures or the same contacts with those. So we're currently looking at our complaint system, and we're going to try and normalise the data a little bit so that we can see how many complaints we're getting versus how many opportunities for complaints. So hopefully in future reports you'll be able to see some matrix that will make that a bit clearer.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, following on about what's happening in our own areas, I just wanted to just draw attention to the fact that the amount of district community infrastructure levy is climbing, because we put a push on to try and get stalled bids, and we've been trying to get more bids coming in, and it's climbed to 498,000 in Q2 of this year. So more projects are coming through, and we're getting busier, which is good. And also we now have a pioneering local listed building consent order with guidance available on the Babergh website to allow those who live in listed buildings to replace approved windows and put in secondary glazing to their listed buildings without planning permission. And also with reference to the neighbourhood plans, I think again we've been encouraging communities to put in place neighbourhood plans, and it's paying off. We've got a lot of activity there, and the neighbourhood plan officer is continuously busy. So that's been paying off too.
Thank you. Councillor Saw.
Following on from Councillor Davies has said about the local listed building consent orders, as we know, this is a subject very close to my heart. I have been informed by officers that although we thought we were the first rural districts to achieve this standard, in fact we may be the first district full stop, because the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea had only adopted localistic building consent orders for their conservation areas, not across the whole council area. So I think we should congratulate ourselves for this first.
Thank you. Well, that is good news.
I'm aware, Chair, I don't think I asked for a seconder to support. This is just for noting. So.
Yeah, okay, may I have a seconder? Councillor Saw, thank you. Right, does anyone wish to say anything more about this or ask any more questions? Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, me again. So on page 4 of the report, there's a very sweeping statement that says scores 100% on partnership working and staff retention. That's really sweeping, and I just wondered if there is any detail behind that.
Councillor McCraw, do you want to pick up on that?
I think it's just a general approach that we work in partnership. I mean, that's been the principle. So bearing in mind this report is an assembly of reports coming in from all the directorates. It's not produced entirely by this particular directorate, and the only way to produce such a report is in partnership. I think that's the essence of it, and we believe we're doing that. And I think the record of the way these reports have developed over the last 2 years prove that point. In that, well, I believe there's a degree of clarity about what each directorate is doing in its various actions, risks, and KPIs. In the top right-hand corner, you can see the little box. That's an assembly of all the information available. You can't do that in isolation. Sorry, it's a rather circular argument, but it is the truth.
Sorry, Joe, did you want to pick up on that?
Yes, if that's okay, councillors. Just coming to say there were 2 specific actions from the action plan that Cabinet members agreed to and that we were working towards. So they are slightly simplified there. We can get back to you with a bit more information, but they were the ones that we all agreed to help deliver our plan for Babergh a couple of years ago. So we can get a little bit more. All that is saying is that we're 100% through those particular actions for those specific projects, but we can send some more information as to what those projects were, if that's of assistance.
Okay. Does anyone else have any more questions? We will move into debate. Does anyone want to say anything about this report that hasn't already been said? Okay. Then can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. We do have quite a few more items left. I was thinking of calling a break at some point. Should we do one more item and then have a break? We'll do one more item and then have a break. Right, so the next item on the list is item 13, paper BCA 2532, Household Recycling and Waste Collections Policy. I'll invite the Cabinet Member for People and Place to introduce the report. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to introduce BCA 2532, the Household Recycling and Waste Collections Policy. I will start with saying, given that I have always felt that people have very strong views about their bin collection, and I would expect members to have lots of questions. So I shall proceed. The implementation of better recycling from June next year will affect every one of the 40,000 plus households in our district. Households will have a different system of recycling and collection, with more bins for different waste streams, a different frequency of collection, and rules regarding proper bin usage. However, I would stress, and I think this is important, we will be focused on ensuring that people have the same day of collection that they do now. Consequently, it is important that we have a revised policy. We've always had a household recycling and waste collections policy, but this reflects the standards and scope of the waste and recycling service the Council will deliver and which will drive the improvement in Council recycling rates as required by government. You will have questions about the policy, and I have the Director of Operations, Mark Ems, the Director of Waste and Recycling and Fleet, Ollie Fairs, and the Service Improvement Advisor, Sharon Bayliss, present to answer any detailed questions you may have. You will note that the report concerns standards and principles. It is not intended to revisit decisions regarding implementation that have already been made by Cabinet and Council, which are covered in section 1.4 of this paper. Almost 9 in 10 UK citizens say they regularly recycle at least most things that can be recycled, but there are still high rates of miscapture. Over 3 in 4 citizens report disposing of recyclable materials in general rubbish, and that's the ones who confess to it. On average, each household misses 2.5 recyclables. Contamination is high. 81% of citizens are putting non-recyclable items in recycling bins. And although, despite this enthusiasm for recycling, less than 1 in 10 citizens feel very confident about what can and cannot be recycled. Now, we know that recycling rates have plateaued in England. The recycling rate is 42.3%, and the latest data from DEFRA reveals that Babergh is ranked 204 out of 343 of English councils with a recycling rate of 39%, when the top performing councils achieve between 59 and 62%. I stress at this point, this is not a criticism, because many of these councils have already made changes to collections and made changes to what can be recycled. So we want to improve this performance. We have to improve this performance. And it's for this reason that the service principles and policies have been designed. But we also recognise that communication with residents is critical to ensuring a positive and effective relationship with them when it comes to these changes. It should be borne in mind that from 2027 onwards, local authorities will be expected to achieve higher recycling rates and will be subject to performance metrics, so that by 2030 a recycling rate of 60% will be achieved, and then 65% and 70% thereafter. So you can see why we need a policy that clearly outlines the standards and scopes of waste and recycling services that we intend to deliver to our residents from early June 2026. The policy must be clear and effective in meeting both resident and service needs and driving the improvements that are required by government. I should emphasise that this is a policy for households, not businesses. We presented and discussed this policy with Oversight and Scrutiny Committee last month, and they were very keen that not only that all council members should be in a position to be able to communicate with residents and answer any questions that they may have. We have since then, and it was always our intention, to regularly communicate with members as to what the changes would be mean, the frequency, how we were going to communicate with residents. And the Household Recycling and Waste Collections Policy, Appendix A, aims to increase recycling rates, reduce contamination, and ensure compliance. The policy also seeks to provide transparency and accountability by clearly outlining the level of services residents can expect and their responsibilities in supporting effective waste management. Importantly, the policy recognises that there will always be exceptions to the standard waste collection service, and provisions will be made to accommodate the specific needs and circumstances of individual households where appropriate. It is true that over the summer, officers have been surveying households and areas to see what the needs of residents will be. And we do recognise that some houses or localities may have particular features where a standard delivery is not appropriate. And as I've said, council officers have spent the summer assessing properties to determine whether they are suitable for a standard collection. I believe that this survey is almost complete, but obviously we are looking at areas where there is no garden, both front and back, no external access, restricted access for vehicle or crews, steps to particular households, steep slopes and banks. If it's determined that standard waste collection service is not suitable for a household, alternative containers will be provided, whether that would be smaller bins or sacks. The council officers are always willing to listen to residents and to take account of their specific needs, particularly when it comes to larger families or those residents that have longer-term health care conditions or disabilities. The policy is designed to raise awareness and encourage residents to recycle correctly. As I've said, we want to increase the amount that we recycle, and I draw your attention to the compositional analysis of black bin content carried out by the Suffolk Waste Partnership in July, which determined that 63% of the contents of black bins could be recycled, and a further 6.7% could be achieved through our household waste recycling centres or the dedicated pink bins that we have just put in as for smaller electrical items. So talking about communication, the council will adopt a 4 E's approach, which is encourage, explain, no, it isn't. It's engage, explain, encourage, and enforce. I got my 4 E's muddled up there. We are not the bin police. We are not going around. We want to take an approach which is about engaging with customers, but there are areas where if there is persistent obstruction of pavements or people are putting out split bags, etc., we will work with them to try and remedy this behaviour. But there may be, we have never actually given out many fixed penalty notices, and we do not wish to do so. But that is always something that's in our arsenal. In the paper, there is you will see an extensive communication programme that is being undertaken with residents. Members will receive briefings on a regular basis to enable them to answer questions from town and parish councils and residents. I would ask you to approve option A, which is adopting the household recycling and waste collections policy ahead of better recycling going live from June next year, and agree that delegated authority for the Director of Operations in consultation with the portfolio holder for people and place to make technical changes to the policy as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saw. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Laura Smith. Right. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Hendry.
Thank you. On page 168, point 4.35, it's saying that property developers will be required to meet the cost of supplying these bins on our new developments, which I think is as it should be. However, it says after that, should this requirement not be met, the cost will fall to the householder. So what exactly are we saying there? Surely if the developers are required to meet the cost, then that should be what's happening, and under what circumstances would that cost be passed to the householder?
I'm sure it will not surprise you, Councillor Hendry, to hear that I am not in favour of any exceptions whatsoever. However, I'm sure the Director of Operations has a reason for this. Hello?
Mark.
No, I was just speaking to Ollie about what the reasons this might be. I think the word developer is really sort of referring to sort of larger schemes of development. Sometimes there are smaller individual properties that are brought forward as well, where it falls down to the owner of the property, who's also the developer of the property as well, really. But this is something that's already in place, and we have no issues with this and don't expect any issues in the future.
Okay, lovely. So you're saying that in general a big developer would be providing those bins. There'd be no case where the developer would say, we don't want to do that, and make the householder pay?
Yeah, in my experience of 10 years, we've never had any issues with developer paying for bins for new developments. Yeah, not paying.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Ollie. Any other questions? Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, on page 190 at 11.23, it says that plastic packaging should be put in the black bin with polystyrene. I've just struggled a bit because I thought we were doing plastic films when we started this scheme, and maybe I've missed it somewhere, but can you just explain, are we doing the plastic film collection? Which bin would it go in? And what sort of plastic are you referring to at 11.23?
We'll check 11.23, but yeah, I think the reference is in conjunction with packaging materials and polystyrene. The type of plastic's not recyclable, tends to be dense and non-film material. Yes, we are collecting plastic films. We are waiting for clarification from the County Council on the exact types of films that will clarity around that, but it is our intention across Suffolk to collect films from June, year ahead of schedule, and we will be communicating out clearly and effectively the types of films that can be recycled.
And are we confident that there are facilities that can recycle those films that would be sent, that they would be sent to?
It's a chicken and egg situation. The facilities to recycle plastic film are developing, and that's part of the government's policy to collect this material at the curbside so that it will promote those operations developing, because they'll have a clean source of feedstock for those mills that are going to be dealing, and plants that are going to be dealing and processing the plastic film. We think it's better to go day one because we can save on communication costs as we communicate it out clearly, and residents won't be thanking us if there's a second separate message, which might get confusing a year down the line. But the County Council, in their role as disposal authorities, working with BIFA to secure that route out.
Yeah, thanks. No, I'm glad we're doing it day one. It's great. Thank you.
Could I just add that at the end of September, Colchester started to collect flexible plastics and cartons, and I believe that East Herts is collecting soft plastics, and in North Somerset they are sending their soft plastics to a facility which granulates, washes, and then sold on the recycled pellets, and they're ready to be made into new packaging. So as the Director of Operations said, the market is developing really fast, and we would expect that to be the case when we start recycling these items.
Thank you. Councillor Sally Davis.
Do we issue fixed penalty notices now, or is this a new thing? What is this new or not?
we've only ever issued in very extreme circumstances, but fixed penalty notices. We do have the ability to issue them. We'll be following DEFRA guidance on the processes to go through. So we're not defining out exactly every circumstance which might lead to a fixed penalty notice. We've given some common reasons why that might be the case, but there is protection there for residents in terms of the number of contacts that will happen in a process leading up to a fixed penalty notice, which is almost certainly likely to involve a visit by one of our waste officers, as well as different letters in the stage of the process. So this isn't just a case of open the top of the bin, contamination, there's your ticket. There's a number of stages to go through, because obviously they can be legally challenged as well.
Councillor Hendry, and then Councillor Smith.
So just on that point, you're talking about enforcement for people not, using the right bins. But how about enforcement for? I know there's a piece in this about people leaving their bins out. I'm thinking particularly of some of our council estates where people have got a lot of bins. They tend to have to put them in all out in the same area, and people tend to leave their bins out all the time. They're still there a week later. A lot of people don't want their bins in their gardens, so they leave them in the alleyways. And this is something I get approached about quite a lot, and I think people don't realise that there's they can report that. And what kind of action are you going to be taking, or what communications are you going to be sending out to try and encourage people to take their bins back in? Because it does cause a lot of issues for people with buggies, wheelchair users, and I think having that extra, more bins is going to create more obstacles. So how are we going to approach that?
Yep, I think that's a fair comment. We'll be adopting a standard approach using 4 E's to engage, explain, encourage and then enforce. So officers would go out and contact the householder and try and speak to them, try to educate first, listen to the issues that they may or may not have there with that happening as well. We'd then explain, we'd explain what the regulations are and what they need to do. If there's reasons, obviously, where they could take those bins back and they've got space where they can store those bins, and that can be taken care of. If not, the waste management officers would work with that group of residents, see if there's any options, for instance, to share bins, to find a communal bin location which is off the pavement in an area which doesn't restrict access. And obviously then they would be encouraging those residents to do that. That might involve a revisit or letters if it's continuing to happen, and that's all before it might get to a stage of enforcement and something being formally sort of happening as well. But we do realise space is at a premium out there as well, so this won't be a case of just jumping to the enforcement. We need to work with people first.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just wondering whether it might be a possibility of working with housing, especially the tenancy management teams, because they tend to be out, the housing officers should be out on foot on these sites, and they can pick that up, because obviously the wastemen aren't going to know if the bins are being left out, because they should be out when they're there, so they're not going to know the scale of the problem. So it might be wise just to liaise with housing on that one.
I think it's fair to say we probably haven't gone as far in this area in the past as to what we could have done, and as part of this project we've been focusing over the summer on collecting data and making sure that's robust for non-standard collections, so that we can communicate appropriately and put the right services in place, be it a different type of collection with smaller bins, boxes, bags, and the options that we have available in the hierarchy that we've set out in the policy. So we're still going to have that team in place leading up to the go-live period and beyond the go-live period, and it's our intention not to be going out and enforcing hard from day one, but actually working with residents to make sure we get the right bins, containers, so that they can recycle as we need them to under the new policy.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Going back to the fixed penalty notice, in the report it lays out the steps that you take when there's contamination. But Councillor Sewell mentioned in the introduction working with residents. You mentioned sending people round. Presumably that's not sending in their heavies. Could you explain a bit more about the steps, please?
we don't have heavies, apart from me and Ollie, and we're not going around unless there's something desperate happening. So our waste management team, we've got a team of waste officers that, we've got officers that go out and educate in schools. They go out and work with residents when there's issues and problems. They go and work with landlords. They go and work with residents that have communal bin areas, and they will go out and talk to people and help find solutions, help to identify what is recyclable in black bins if it's not being recycled, and try and educate on that basis. But very much about trying to find solutions to the problem and not jumping to the final stage, which we see as an exception, really.
I've got a quick question, and that's the communication has got to be very comprehensive, because we are making the system a lot more complicated. The graphic on page 202 is great. I just want one quick question about that. On the blue bin for containers, it might be useful to include aerosol cans there, because I know that many people I speak to are not aware that they can be recycled. The other thing is, so that people are constantly reminded about this, would it be possible to have something like this graphic that we can stick on bins?
That is possible.
I think
it is possible, and it will be discussed at a Suffolk Waste Partnership meeting coming up shortly. It's a query that's been raised in Mid-Suffolk as well. There's pros and cons to putting stickers on bins. It's not. We would prefer not to have to carry out the task of trying to put stickers on bins. We're only delivering one new bin out, and if it's going to be effective, it'd be getting that a sticker onto that bin, and the other bin as it comes out, trying to sticker that with our crews wouldn't work very well. But there is a possibility we could print stickers and send stickers out, so residents could decide where they want to place the stickers. There's also QR codes on the new bin, so service details can be accessed. And at the same time as this goes out, it'll be quite a comprehensive mailing. So the first mailing that's going out to all residents will be happening very early in the new year. A generic mailing with a leaflet about the new service and an individual letter to all residents, followed up fairly soon after by a second service-specific mailing, which will have a calendar and the day of the week and frequently asked questions booklet and more information about the service, at the same time as the in-district advertising and the other work that's going on will all start to happen as well. When the new food caddies go out, there'll be leaflets that go out with those. There's a lot of work planned, and our own comms team are also planning to supplement that with social media work, which is very much more tailored to make it a bit more real to what's going on in our district as well.
Thank you. Councillor Helen Davis.
Thank you. I have a resident who contacted me today having read this paper. So I think he should be applauded for that. I don't know how many residents actually read our cabinet papers. He's in a single person household, currently receives small bins, and having read 4.2.3, he was concerned that he would not be able to get a new smaller bin going forward. Is that the kind of thing your survey took into account, and would he be able to apply for a smaller bin?
Yes, yeah, he absolutely would. We're just on our website under the bin changes section. We've got a contact us form in there for people to come to us with concerns. So as Mark alluded to earlier, we're not having a pick and mix option, but where people are concerned, come to us and we'll work with them to find a solution that fits them the best. So yeah, if you could like to refer the gentleman to us, we can accommodate.
Thank you. I will pass that on.
Any other questions? Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd just dip into the waste bit. A few questions, really. These were raised during the ONS session we had a few weeks ago. We talked about the wide electrical appliances section and the 1.9% figure that's in table 1 under 4.9. That figure, Ollie, presumably that was the extraction volumes from the bin and not an extrapolation of what potentially is going into the waste sites. Question one. Question two was really, probably this was more wishful thinking really, but I've got a note here, and we talked about the glass payments, which the community bins in various parish council sites, etc. And I've got a note here that we intend to continue with payments until 2028, with the bins being extracted, with the bins being extracted. Is that the case?
Yes. So the first point, that 1.9%, that is just that 1.9% is just a reflection of that sample taken. So it might have been a mustard toaster in a range of bins, and yeah, absolutely the community funding for brewing sites, that level of revenue that they receive will continue until 2028.
Thanks for the confirmation, Charlie. On the sort of the payments back to parish councils potentially, or community councils, how will that operate? I mean, what records have you got? How will you know what they've received? Will you take an average figure? I'm just interested to know, because I know lots of parish councils have already asked me about this, because for example, like Hintlesham, they raise probably nearly £2,000 a year in glass, because we drink a lot of wine.
Yes, so we're going to be using the average of the last 3 years' figures, and we'll be writing to all parish councils in the early new year, in January.
Excluding any World Cup years.
Perfect, thanks, you.
Okay. Right, we'll move into debate. Does anyone wish to say anything? No. Well, I'll say a few words if that's all right. We've got obviously with better recycling, things are going to get more complicated. Residents are going to have to do more to help with sorting things into different bins, although we haven't gone to the extreme of having different containers for absolutely every single waste stream, which is good. And we're relying on the materials recycling facility to do a lot of that sorting for us. With the 4E's approach, it makes a lot of sense. Engagement, explaining the education side of it is going to be very important. But I do see that there's bound to be some resistance, because it's change, it is more effort, and there may be other reasons why people might not want to comply as much as we would like. So the encouragement side of it, I think, we shouldn't underestimate the effort we need to put into that. There's going to be a lot to do to persuade people and to help change behaviours over time. But I can see that we will have to get through that enforcement process ultimately with some people, unfortunately. But I think with what we've got here, it's a multi-stage enforcement process which is not heavy-handed in the early stages, but it's there to show that ultimately, though, we do have to have as much compliance with this as possible, not only to make our jobs easier as in terms of waste collection, but also it's the only way that we're going to hit those recycling targets, and it's the right thing to do. We don't want a lot of this stuff going into the incinerator or going or not being recycled in one way or another. So I think what we've got here is a policy that is comprehensive and will help us to move forward. But as I said, I think we must expect that there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done on that 4E's approach in the period. It's going to take some months, years maybe, to bring the compliance levels up to where we want them to be. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I do think we are very conscious of, as I think all the districts and the county is, of taking residents with us on this. As you can see from the paper, there is a very comprehensive communications package involved in the change. I do think, looking at, there are several councils that have gone to 3 weekly, and our officers have visited many of them. If I could just draw members' attention to North Somerset, which launched its new recycling and waste collection service in June this year. They are also on 3 weekly. Early results show a 15% reduction in black bin collection, in black bin rubbish, and an overall 10% increase in recycling rates. So, you know, I do think that if we explain this properly, our experience with residents is that they will do this. I think obviously there may well be some early issues, teething issues, and we are very prepared to, as we said, engage and explain with residents what this means. I received an email, as I know many of us did, from the recycling education officer who's been to several schools, and I tend to think that children are our secret weapon in this, and will be ensuring that their parents put things in the correct receptacle. But I am fairly confident if other councils can do this, there is no reason why we cannot.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I think I'll now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right, we'll have a short break now, if that's all right. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Moving on with the agenda, item 14, paper BCA 2533, Funding and Grants Processes Review Progress Report. And I'll invite the Cabinet Member for Thriving Communities to introduce the report. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to report BCA/25/33. It is a paper for noting. First of all, I would like to congratulate the grants team on their recent funding summits and funding surgeries. I hope you won't mind my interrupting the introduction to do that. It was a very successful series of events, and we've had nothing but positive feedback about it from what I can work out. So, onto the paper. It speaks for itself, so I won't go on too long. The consultation was made by the grants team in collaboration with a councillor working group in spring last year, and the action plan was brought to Cabinet in July 2024. At this point, I'd like to thank Councillor Saw for kicking the process off and Councillor Potter for seeing it through. There are 34 actions across 5 themes in total, although 7 of those actions were not progressed due to budgetary considerations. 24 of the actions are completed, as you can see in the paper, including actions to increase transparency and performance management, such as the communications toolkit that goes out to organisations awarded grants, the position statement that's been published, the social value policy in the procurement system. There are actions to increase match funding and bring money into the district that way, developing strategic partner relationships with key organisations, and more actions to give non-financial support, such as the funding events that we've had recently, and also actions to improve the customer journey, including the landing page on the website. Grants and funding is a discretionary service, and budget pressures mean that our grants are shrinking, unfortunately. But the approach in this paper speaks to how fundamentally useful the service is for residents, especially at this time with the cost of living. The communities team does brilliant work across our district. I'm sure you'll agree, and I propose noting this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Derek Davis. Any questions? Councillor Sally Davis.
Yes, I went to the grant summit organised in Bilderston, and it was great. It was you realised, you know, how many grants are available. It was well attended and it was really well run. So thank you to the communities team for that. So it's been now 12 months since the review. I was just wondering, have we had feedback? Are communities finding it easier to identify grants and find their way through? Because there are lots of different pots, but it seems to me that it should be now much easier for communities to find the funding and be encouraged to apply for funding. Have you had any feedback from the communities?
Yes, we have, and I can share actually the feedback from the summits as well, so thank you for that. And generally, applicants are finding it much easier to navigate not just our funds, but other funds that are available across Suffolk. We work with other funders and try and come up with a process that kind of aligns with each other so that it's seamless for organisations.
Any other questions? I've got one, Laura, and it's on Appendix 1 on page 281 on the locality awards process. And it says that organisations should contact their district councillors to discuss the project prior to applying. I'm find it rather difficult to understand how a project could proceed and go through that pre-application stage without the district councillor's knowledge, because the district councillor would be the one who would decide how much and if and how much money can be allocated to it. So I think the word should probably needs to be changed there, and that organisations will contact their district councillors to discuss the project and the potential for funding and how much funding is available.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point there, and well, the team will work on that.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Wyman, do you have a question?
Just a brief one, Chair.
Yeah.
On Appendix A, point 18, proactively encourage and review the spend of neighbourhood SIL. I mean, I think that's a really good point, because I think parishes do need some help with this stuff, because we've thrown quite a bit of money at people over the last, sort of 5-10 years, and they continually seem to be able to make not amazingly good decisions about how that money is spent. So the efficacy of the funding that we have given sometimes doesn't always get spent as efficiently, perhaps, as it should. And it would be really useful, I think, if we were able to give a bit more support, which I assume that's all about, into parishes to make sure they do make, better decisions or get the encouragement and support that they need.
Thank you. I believe that is a work in progress, and I'll leave the officers to explain further if there's anything to say.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we have been doing a piece of work with parish councils and for parish councils around how they can spend their neighbourhood SIL. So on the on Babergh's website, we now have a range of toolkits, so that they can do consultation to understand what the community's needs and aspirations are. We've worked with colleagues in planning and SIL to update the parish infrastructure investment plan so that they can kind of have their own record of what's important to them. And then around the prioritisation is working with those parish councils that have the most neighbourhood SIL and neighbourhood SIL that's due to expire as well, to help them spend that.
Just a quick, thanks, Laura, I appreciate that. I've noticed an uptick in my contact with Rachel over how we're doing stuff, which is great. And it is really important, because neighbourhood plans are becoming more generous through SIL and the ones that are made with 25% payments, and the parish council do hold quite substantial amounts of money, and that money needs to be, as I said, spent sort of sensibly and wisely, and it's easy to go the wrong way. But I appreciate the...
Thank you. Any other questions, or shall we move to debate? We'll move to debate then. Does anyone wish to say anything? Councillor Derek Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Smith makes a really good point in introducing this paper, because the good work from the communities team is not just about the administration and the allocation of the awards, but the funding forums that they did. I went to the one in Shotley, was absolutely superb, well attended, not just by Shotley people, but other people on the peninsula as well. Obviously you had your own in this, but a lot. And it was really useful. So I'll give it a classic example. That was something there, that our church is crumbling and falling down. Of course, as we know, we can't provide funding as directly for churches, but the officers were able to explain to the people from the church where they could go, how they could apply for funding and what they should do. That's an additional service, but it's really useful. And like John, among others, I share locality officer. I think the reintroduction of the locality officers to the district has been immense. It's been really useful. I'm lucky, well, I think we're all lucky, but I've got a really good locality officer in Rachel. She came out to the library, for example, on Friday. She came and she sat and chatted with the various groups. about options and things like that. That one-on-one contact is vital, and I know what a great work they do. So it's not just the administration of the funding, but the localities awards, as people know, I'm a big champion of them, are hugely important, but it's the support work from the communities team that goes with it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? For my part, I would echo everything that's been said in terms of the benefit of what we do with these grants. They make a huge difference to many of our residents and communities, and although it's a discretionary part of what we do, it's one we should strive as much as possible to continue to fund, notwithstanding the pressures on our budget. And if we ever get challenged about that decision, I think we can justify it as a cabinet, and we need to continue to justify that. One thing I do want to suggest, following on from the comment I made earlier about that minor change to the appendix on locality awards, whether to have an additional recommendation, Councillor Smith, and I'll read out potential wording if you approve of it, that Cabinet agreed to delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Thriving Communities to make amendments as appropriate to the criteria and guidance for grant funding to ensure that it remained relevant, useful and accessible. Are you happy with that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would be happy with that.
Thank you. So, members of the Cabinet, I'll ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote with that additional recommendation, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 15, paper BCA 2534, planning fee charges, additional services. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Heritage, Planning and Infrastructure to introduce the report. Councillor Sally Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asking Cabinet to approve the additional fee schedule recommended in paragraph 2 of the report before you. The full schedule is set out in Appendix 1. As you know, we've discussed the Council's budget and the medium-term outlook for our finances. It's clear that we must increase the Council's income. Our planning service currently charges fees for applications and pre-planning consultations, but the team has identified several functions that are time-consuming and resource-intensive, for which we do not currently charge. It's essential that we recover the costs of our officers' time in carrying out these tasks. So we propose introducing charges for the following services, and the detail is in the report. Section 106 modifications. A Section 106 agreement is a legal agreement between the local planning authority and a developer to ensure obligations are met to mitigate development impacts. But when an applicant wishes to modify an agreement, the negotiation and drafting process can be lengthy. We don't currently charge for this work, but we propose a 3-tier charging structure based on the number of dwellings. The second charge is the Section 106 compliance confirmation. Following completion of an agreement, developers may apply for confirmation that the obligations have been met. We propose introducing a fee of £300 for this service. Invalid and withdrawn applications. Around 30% of applications received are invalid. That's between 600 and 1,000 per year for each council. While many are later validated, a significant proportion are withdrawn, meaning that the full fee is refunded and all the validation work that's been done by our officers is abortive. This places pressure on the planning team and delays customers, and we propose a fee of £50 to £100 in these cases. And finally, a charge for amendments during applications. Amendments often require an extension of time for a planning decision. There's additional information, there's further consultation, adding to the costs and delay. Currently, we do not charge for the extra work that our officers do, and we propose a fee of £100 to £500 for amendments. These charges, I believe, are a fair and proportionate response to the budgetary pressures on our planning service. They will help us recover costs for additional work and ensure that our service remains sustainable, and I ask you to approve paragraph 2 of the report before you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hendry. Any questions? Councillor Saw.
Yes, I would like to know if these charges are similar to those of our neighbouring councils.
Yeah, I think we have benchmarked them, haven't we, Gemma? But I will ask Gemma to fill us in.
Thank you. So no other Suffolk authorities are charging for these. We did check that. There is in appendix to a list of other authorities that we reviewed. We reviewed an awful lot of authorities to see who charged for what and to try and sweep up anything else that we should look into to charge. But the ones that we concluded we should charge for, we have put those fees in there. So they're the ones we benchmarked against, but no charges by Suffolk authorities and neighbouring authorities for those.
Councillor Derek Davis.
I just want sort of an assurance, really, that the developers or the applicants won't be punished if objectors make the decision to try and, take if you like, if they want further consultation or if they want amendments. It's the objectors that are driving that, but it's the applicant that will have to pay for it.
Well, I mean, a lot of the amendments may well be driven by objectors, but I think that again the actual level of these fees are not horrendously high because there are many reasons why you would want amendments, and I think that's why they're not unreasonably high. But I don't know whether Gemma can expand on that.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. So, if objectors raise issues that are not related to planning or that we think are maybe not reasonable or not related or something we don't feel could or should be addressed, that wouldn't be a driver for it. Of course, they may raise the same issues that we're considering ourselves, and that may trigger that amendment. So I can't say no, it won't happen, but it will be at the request of the planning officer that process is undertaken essentially with that charge. Thank you.
Councillor Saw.
I recognise that that we do not have, like many councils, as a full complement of planning officers. So consequently, I'm all in favour of the charging. But I'm just wondering, the government is always saying that they are going to help councillors get more planning officers and put more planning officers into training. I hope this is not a sort of sidebar question, but do we think that we have sufficient planning officers to undertake this level of work and to ensure that we do get our services adequately rewarded?
I mean, the team at the moment is doing this work, so we do have sufficient work at planning officers at the moment, and they are meeting. We decide. We've got a good record on deciding applications within time. We do have extensions of time, and that's when you get these sort of amendments. But they are coping with the workload at the moment.
Any other questions? Councillor Wyman.
This could be an out-of-scope question, Chair, but I'll stop me if you don't want to carry on.
Okay.
I've noticed that case officer work, essentially, people make an application for a determination, don't they? They put forward an offer, a proposal. We should say just yes or no. We seem to enter into quite long negotiations, which can last, sort of 6 months, 9 months, sometimes even, before we reach that determination, and we sometimes push forward the determination date. My only question really is, do we review those time limits in terms of how long we go? And maybe there's scope for, dare I suggest, a sort of an extension fee where we have these long negotiations, because it's difficult sometimes to make the refusal, because obviously the applicant gets emotionally upset. But there is a process, and we should try and stick to the process, because, you know, our time is limited in terms of resources. And my question is really, do you think we're being as firm as we should be, and or do we need to look at that process of determination in terms of how long it takes and how much time we put into actually doing it, Gemma?
Councillor, you were right earlier on that it is a bit out of scope, but it's a very interesting and valid question, and I think if we can take it up outside of the meeting and get a response, because I think it does deserve a response, but it is out of scope. We'll move into debate then. Does anyone wish to say anything about this? It is fairly straightforward, and the report is clear and self-explanatory. Does anyone wish to make any comment? If not, then I'll ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. There's 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 16 next, paper BCA 2535, Gateway to Home Choice Allocations Policy. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to seek Cabinet approval for the revised allocation policy for Gateway to Home Choice. This revision is to ensure we're compliant with recent legislative changes and to ensure consistency across the Gateway Partnership. The changes proposed will prioritise vulnerable groups such as care leavers, victims of domestic abuse and armed forces personnel. For example, in the case of domestic abuse, it's vital that people fleeing domestic abuse have the ability to move out of their area and apply for other areas. This is something that we work in partnership with other councils with, so that we will also, that they will do the same for us as well. So I think all these amendments are important, and I'd like Cabinet to approve the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Derek Davis. Any questions, anyone? No? Councillor Smith.
Just to clarify, this paper means it will be easier for domestic violence victims and armed forces veterans to be housed.
I think the main thing is that the local connection is being relaxed a bit, so that people who are fleeing domestic violence don't have to show the same local connection that other applicants may do. But I will just confirm that with Amma.
That's absolutely correct. It's to make sure that they can join the housing register, because what was happening was people being told you haven't met the local connection criteria, you haven't been here for 2 years, so they're being exempted from it.
Any other questions? Anyone wish to say anything in debate? Councillor Derek Davis.
Well, as a seconder, you may not be surprised that I fully support this for both the reasons given. It's an excellent paper, it's an excellent initiative, and it's really something we should be doing, we should have done a while ago. For armed forces personnel, yeah, that battle when they go back to a place they haven't been to for years, but it's fundamentally their home, having that local connection is there, but it isn't always recognised, and so it's brilliant that Babergh and with Suffolk are recognising it and doing that. And exactly the same with domestic violence. people who are victims and survivors that need that housing. So it's important that we support them and back them all the way, and make sure that the safe houses that we have are in really tip-top condition as well.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Okay then. Well, from my point of view, I totally agree with what Councillor Davis has said and Councillor Hendry's introduction. This is very simple, straightforward change to the policy, and one that really no one could possibly argue against. So can we now move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right. Item 17, paper BCA 2536, the Joint AIDS and Adaptations Policy for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils. Again, I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Joint AIDS and Adaptations Policy. This report is to seek Cabinet approval for the Joint AIDS and Adaptations Policy and to delegate authority to the Director of Housing with the portfolio holder to make minor amendments to maintain compliance with legislative and best practice. We have statutory obligations to provide these services, but the support we offer supports vulnerable residents, reducing hospital admissions and promoting independent living, enabling residents to remain in their homes, and that this makes a real difference to their lives. Therefore, I'd like Cabinet to approve option 1. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Saw. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I might have missed it in the paper. How long do you have to be in a property before you're eligible for AIDS and adaptations, please?
I believe it's 12 months, but I will just double check that with Alma.
We do that for people who move into our properties as well, so you can be considered, because sometimes somebody may need, say, a wet level access shower, or may need some slight adjustments to the property, so we can do that once they've been allocated the property, so you don't necessarily have to be in there for 12 months.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you for that. Completely different question. Going forward, EV cars are going to be more common. They're often awarded to people in Motability schemes, but people don't necessarily have charging points. Is there any possibility that EV charging points or gullies could be considered as adaptations? Might this be a consideration going forward?
Thank you. This was something we actually discussed at the portfolio holder briefing the other day, which I don't believe, Alma, you were there. And I think the outcome was that we wouldn't be able to include that in disabled adaptations, but it has opened up a whole new conversation about how we are going to help people with mobility issues access EV charging, but I don't know if Alma can add any more to that. I'm sorry, it's a bit out of the blue.
The standard we take it's from what we do with the Disabled Facilities Grant. Obviously, EV charging is coming after that, and the legislation hasn't changed to follow that. So I think as a council, we'd need to take a view on that as an authority about what it is we want to do and how we want to include it for our own residents.
Excuse me, Councillor Sally Davis.
Yes, I have corresponded with you on this, Emma, but I recently, I have a resident in my ward who has motor neuron disease, and the MND Association has found that the average wait time for vital large home adaptations for someone with MND is 375 days. And by that time, 1/3 of those living with MND will have died. But this scheme and the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is can be for people who own or rent houses privately, in 2.10 terminal or palliative care, we prioritise those. Is explicitly sort of terminal, fatal, quite fast-moving conditions? Would we act really quickly to adapt a home in order? And is it possible to put something in writing in this part of the policy to confirm that? I put that really badly. I can't believe how badly I expressed that. But anyway.
We will try and move as quickly as we can. We sometimes have a little bit of disparity in the service. With GFG grants, we can move quite quickly, because if you are looking at minor adaptations, it goes very, very quickly. We can turn around those within a week, as long as we've got all the information.
That's the Disabled Facilities Grant. Right.
But when it comes to our own tenants, the way we structure it at the moment is that we need an OT assessment. However, we do have discretion in these things. So I think what we're looking to do with this policy is to set out some parameters about how we're going to be treating different things. I think we can put in further clarifications around those conditions, because the policy is not explicit on that.
Yeah.
So we could look to do that.
You could look to be a bit more specific about that. That would be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? I think Councillor Davies has made an excellent point on that, and I have residents as well who have waited an awful long time. Not the fault of Babergh, but because they have to work in partnership with others. For example, getting the assessments done, and people actually coming out. It took 14 months for someone to come out to basically realise that a person that desperately needed it actually needed a wet room. I mean, 14 months they waited just for the assessment. In fairness, Babergh acted really quickly once it got the go-ahead, and then we had to go through Suffolk County Council and then to Babergh. So anything that improves it's got to be a good thing. The question I'd ask is, when you look to sort of nail it down a little bit more, Councillor Davies mentioned MND, but if you look at Alzheimer's Society as well, horrendous that people need special adaptations for that, as well as other things. Could you be specific in the type of palliative care or illnesses that are included in that?
Yes, we can be a little bit more specific around that. And in terms of the OT assessments, we're looking to see whether or not we can get some sort of service level agreement with county, so that we can have clearer defined timelines about when things were going to be turned around.
Okay, any other questions, anyone? Councillor White? No. Shall we move to debate? Does anyone want to say anything? Nope. All fairly straightforward. Then we'll move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Sword, do you want me to take your vote verbally? Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 18, paper BCA 2537, the Joint Domestic Abuse Policy for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils 2025 to 2028. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the report for the joint domestic abuse policy. There is an amendment to the recommendations, and that is to add delegate authority to the Director of Housing with the portfolio holder to make minor amendments to maintain compliance with legislation and best practice. This is a new policy here in Babergh, but it doesn't mean that it is new work that we're doing. I think we do fantastic work with domestic abuse, both across housing and our community safety teams. So this report is really just to have a policy, put all this down, so that there is guidance for how we deal with things. So I'd like to recommend that Cabinet approve recommendation 2.1 as set out in the report. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Smith. Questions? No questions? Councillor Wyman, do you have a question? We'll move to debate. Does anyone wish to say anything?
Sorry.
Councillor Smith? Sorry.
That's all right. Actually, this is a question. Since this policy was finalised, the Angolini inquiry has published another report, and unfortunately, violence against women and girls is an issue where there is still huge prevalence, and I'm wondering whether our report, our policy will be updated given the recommendations of the government's own policy, which we are expecting in the next couple of months.
Yes, I'm sure that will be the case, Councillor Saw, but I will just pass that to Anne.
Yes, we'd always seek to update policies in line with any government guidance or changes in legislation.
Does anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Sally Davis.
Yeah, again, it's a question. I'm constantly amazed by the prevalence of domestic abuse. I mean, in my own ward, you know, which looks like a nice affluent place, it's the type of offence that outstrips all other offences in many rural areas. It says at 4.20, statistics show that domestic abuse affects 1 in 4 women, but 1 in 3 in Suffolk. Is there any reason for that? Because that's actually quite a difference.
Do we have any background to that? Councillor Smith.
I know the community safety team had a hand in writing this paper, and I can ask them if they can give you some background on that. It's a shocking statistic.
It is a shocking statistic. The numbers really are far, far too high, and I can understand why there's the legislation, and we must do everything we can within that to help to bring those numbers down within Babergh. It's as you say, it is a significant problem in rural areas, and something has to be done, and we just can't tolerate the levels and the numbers we see here. Does anyone else wish to say anything? If not, we'll move to the vote. We'll move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. We have one further item on the agenda, which is a confidential item, and as with these things, we have to formally vote to go into confidential session. So to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So may I have a proposer, please? Councillor McCraw, seconder, Councillor Saw. We'll now vote by a show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. And we'll just wait for the live stream to be